Hello everyone. I hope the world is treating you okay. I hope the universe is treating you okay, and I hope you and your family and your friends as well are safe as houses, because it's a pretty negative time for a lot of people. Being an introvert, I'm kind of actually enjoying this period. I might not be saying that in 4 weeks' time, but we'll see. Okay, so today really follows on from a couple of questions I've been getting recently by some people. I actually got into this a little bit in a recent live stream, and that's about my training protocol, or the basics of my training, how I visualize and build up to something. And I'm just going to talk you through like a couple of points. There's roughly 4 or 5 points. I've got them written out here in front of me, and I've made some notes on it. The basics of my training, and from like the last 8, I think it's like 8 years. Wow, is it that long? 8 years of like training, getting coached by people, coaching myself, going for different goals, different races, always training for certain things. I've learned quite a lot, and this is almost without having the knowledge that I've now loaded myself with over the last couple of months that I've read online. I've watched webinars, I've like mingled with people to learn how they do it, and how the leaders in the industry coach people, and how they develop riders, and I've applied it to myself before applying it to other people. So the basics of my training, first of all, we're going to break it down into 3 pillars. So you have intensity, duration, frequency. I mean, you can, whichever way around you want to label those, but the basics of that is when you look at your week of training, so you have your Monday to Sunday laid out, or some of you do Sunday to Saturday. I have to know which days I can train first, and then I have to know how long I can train for, and then I can work out intensity. So first of all, if you're going to look at your week by week basis, look at your forthcoming week, think which days can I train, which days can't I train, which can be my hardest days, which can be my easiest days, and then you can fill in the blanks. Now, this gets a little bit complicated if you don't have training piece, or you don't have background knowledge of it. Trying to like basically simplify it as much as possible, but the thing is, if you do a hard session on Monday, you know you've only got 45 minutes to burn, quite literally, on Monday, and you had a day off on Sunday. You can probably go into that Monday session, it's only going to be 45 minutes, you can probably do a hellishly hard workout on Monday. Now, because you've only got 45 minutes, you can get the most out of it. Tuesday, if you've got 2 hours, then you can bring that intensity down. You know that obviously the longer the ride is, the less intense it's going to be. So, number 1 is reverse periodization. I've followed reverse periodization for the last like 2 or 3 years, I'd like to say, and the reason being is because I know, well, you see a lot of riders who race Grand Tours, you know, professional riders, even some of the best elite riders in the UK, they escape from wherever they live and they go into a training camp somewhere warm in the winter. We were lucky enough to do this a number of years ago, where we would go into like Australia for a 2-month block. Now, that's brilliant. Like, we could bash out 30-hour weeks, we could like absolutely crush it. When you're in the UK, like, things start to get in the way a little bit. You get ice, you get snow. Those of you who live in the Northern Hemisphere, you know what I'm talking about. It's not indicative of long hours on the bike outside. It just isn't. So how do you go about changing that? How do you go about making that work for you? You follow the reverse periodization approach. There's plenty of stuff on it online. But again, to oversimplify it, it's basically high intensity interval training in the winter. And, you know, it's bad weather and stuff. In theory, and again, oversimplifying it again, this is probably what this whole video is going to be about, but just take it with a pinch of salt. If you've got enough ride history in you, so if you've ridden for the last 2 years, 3 years, whatever, you don't have to keep going back to that base. You don't have to keep going, especially if you're riding constantly all the way through the year. If you take a big blocks off the bike, potentially you might want to do a couple of weeks of that base training just to get yourself back into it. But in theory, you never lose that base. You never lose it. So you can keep ticking over, and this is why reverse periodization works during the winter months if you live in the UK especially. Obviously indoor sessions get very popular. That works really well, and you can race and things like that, so you can have fun. But it also makes it very easy to gradually overload. So the other side of reverse periodization is in the summer months, then you can start to add on your like longer rides and do, you know, your 3, 4, 5, or some of you might even do 7 or 8 hour rides. Number 2, again, my basics of training, Polaroid training. Now, this gets thrown about a lot, and it's because it doesn't have any real kind of scientific mass data behind it to say that it works. The thing is, if you've done it yourself and you fully bought into it and it works for you, then it works for you. Like, I've put it to good use numerous times. I don't follow it all the time, but it can certainly have its place. For example, I did a full season of racing last year where I, you know, raced across a whole different range of power zones, and then when I got close, like 6 to 8 weeks out from the British Hill Climb Championships, I'm training for one specific event, one specific effort. Then you can really take that apart and say, well, why do I need to be doing this zone 3, zone 4 stuff anyway, when I'm going to be aiming to ride at zone 5, zone 6 for this hill climb? So it has its place. It links in with reverse periodization because in theory you can do that stuff in the winter and then come back to other things in the spring, summer, autumn. You can have that sweet spot, have that threshold work and things like that. You can come back to it. It's never gonna go away. You know, you can still do a threshold session a week. You can still do a sweet spot session a week, but you can. The majority of your stuff can be following the reverse periodization approach. The vast majority of people do see an improvement with Polaroid training, but this leads us on to number 3, always to be event specific in whatever you do. And in order to be event specific, you have to have progression. So progression, that can be like number 3B, I think, if we have 3A, 3B. So leading up to an event, you need to really break down, and this needs to be quite far in advance, break down what exactly that event is going to entail. And a lot of times you'll get an elevation chart of that event. You'll be able to see it on Strava. You'll be able to see like the fastest times up the climbs. You'll be able to see like the average times up the climbs. So if you're doing a sportive or ultra endurance or whatever it is, you can see, oh, that climb's going to take me like 20 minutes at 200 watts to get over it. And it's going to come like 80k into the ride, and 80k into the ride is probably going to be around 3 hours because it's fairly lumpy. So once you have this, you can start to create almost like a spreadsheet of the perfect interval workout. And this interval workout will get very specific. You will be able to train that interval workout like every couple of weeks and hopefully see an improvement, or hopefully see, you'll see plenty of improvements on the climbs. Your overall time will get faster and things like that. The world tour teams, or like the people at the highest level of the sport, they set the bar pretty high with this sort of thing. Like, they really take it seriously. VeloViewer, you know, we use Google Street View. It's like, when you know what you're faced with, it can become 100 times easier to defeat that thing. Like with road racing, for one, this doesn't have to apply to road racing, but for road racing, you'll know a lot of the times that, like, this is my best 20-minute power, when I'm fresh, like after a 20-minute warm-up, this is my best 20-minute power. And then if you can do 400 watts for 20 minutes, then you want to be able to do as close to that 400 at the end of a race as possible. So you want to be aiming for something like, 380, 390 for 20 minutes after all that racing in your legs. And by focusing on the data and the small things, you can see that at the end of a race, I've burned 2,500 calories. I've done 2,500 kilojoules of work. At the end of this race, I burnt 3,000, but my power was like 370. So you start to build a picture of what's needed and what that fatigue profile looks like over that length of time. Number 4 is work in blocks, not weeks. Overall, look at your week, look at your month, look at the schedule. What can you build it? Where's the progression? What can you ideally do? But by working in blocks, you take the age-old one of Monday and Friday are rest days. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is a 3-day block. Saturday, Sunday is a 2-day block. Most pros on training camps, but most general people on training camps will respond very well to 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off. That doesn't work all the time. There's a reason why they do it on training camp, is because they're handling such a big load over those 3 days that they then find that 1 day off is enough to reset for the next 3 days, and so on and so forth. But by working in blocks, you allow yourself to focus on almost 3 different things, or 2 different things. You're working in 2-day blocks. But you can say that first day after the rest day, high intensity. Second day, endurance. Third day, more high intensity or moderate intensity. And you can start to, when you start to throw things around and you start to change places, you start to see which one actually works best for you. This works really well actually on a race week. So when you come up to a race on a Sunday, if you've got years and years worth of data, you can see that it doesn't really matter what you do that day before the race. It actually matters what you do in that week up to it. Like, have you really overcooked yourself too much in that endurance ride on the Wednesday? And the last thing for me, number 5, is to test. There is a really good quote that training is testing and testing is training. You don't have to do the formal test. You don't have to do a 5-minute test, 1-minute test, 5-second test, 20-minute test. You don't have to do those anymore. You can, and they serve a purpose still, but there's so much more to it than that now. There's so much more to it. So, for instance, if you really want to boost your aerobic engine, you really want to stretch and stress yourself over, 60, 90 minutes, you want to be able to ride like a sweet spot, basically, for 90 minutes, which is 88 to 94, 95% of FTP. You want to be able to ride at that for 90 minutes. That's hard. That is hard. If you build up to it, that's a sure sign progression that your aerobic engine is really being stretched and developed. So when you get to 90 minutes, for me, riding at 330 watts or something for 90 minutes, that is, when you look at it, 5.5 watts per kilo. If I was able to do 5.5 watts per kilo for 90 minutes, that would be a pretty decent aerobic base. So that could be a test. Just the same as, doing that and then recording. If your power is staying the same, you do it again 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, your heart rate is five beats lower. So all of a sudden you're like, I haven't actually got any fitter. Like, I haven't actually, it's still the same. And actually, your heart rate average was 5 watts lower and your max was 5 beats lower. Sorry, beats, not watts. So you see that there actually is a change. Physiologically there is a change. It may not feel like it, but there is actually evidence to say that. And with things like, things are always developing. So you have like Training Peaks, you have WKO 5, which I use, and you have certain protocols that you can now look at with the power duration curve, which is basically your maximum powers over a certain time frame. So you have 0 seconds here. You have your watts going up this side, you have your time going across that side, and obviously the power curve drops as time goes on. That's obviously natural. Now, for someone like me who doesn't have a really high peak, my curve is somewhat flat. And this is generally what you see with kind of time trialists or pursuiters, climbers, you know, things of that nature. So what we see is with WKO5 is that what it picks out, importantly, which is actually quite easy to do just by thinking back of what you've done over the last month. You don't have to have the software, but it picks out the lowest hanging fruit on that graph. So what have you not really worked on over the last kind of 30, 90 days? And for me, use myself as an example, I've not worked on my 2 second, surprise, surprise. I've also not worked on my 1.5 minutes. It's a weird time frame, isn't it? But I've also not worked on my 27 minute, which is interesting. Because that's, I mean, when I think about it, it's true. Like, I've not really done any intervals at all where I've ridden more than 22 minutes. I did a time trial last week on Zwift. There was 21 minutes. Then you can see the drop off really quickly on the power curve. So I've not really done anything in these time ranges. And that's really interesting. It's a little bit common sense as well, because when you look back and you go, oh yeah, I can't really remember doing an effort like that in a long time. So even for someone, you know, like you who hasn't got the software, you can still, you know, look back and think, I haven't done that. Let's just give it a go this week. And that is part of kind of the ongoing testing theme that we now see. You know, it's no longer kind of the 3-week block of training and the 1 week easy, and the 4th week easy, and then, you know, hit the load of testing. It still has its place and it can still be done because it still does bring results and benefits. But this ongoing testing is becoming a new theme, and I hope you introduce that into your own schedule or into your own training or whatever the heck you're planning on doing. I know there's no races, there's no events on for the foreseeable future, but particularly if you ride on Zwift or, you know, you're still training and still ticking over, I hope that brought you some value in some way and wasted away some of your time today as well. So I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. Give the video a like, thumbs up, and comment down below, and make sure you subscribe too, because there's going to be more of these. I feel like there should be more. Alright, see ya.